What if I told you that on a single day in history, every clock on Earth seemed to lie, every sundial became useless, and time itself appeared to break down? This isn't science fiction. This is the story of December 9th, 1958, a date that most people have never heard of, but one that left scientists, astronomers, and governments around the world scrambling for answers. Picture this. You wake up one morning, check your watch, and notice something feels wrong. The sun isn't where it should be. Your shadow falls at an impossible angle. Birds are flying in confused patterns, and somewhere deep in your gut, you know something fundamental about reality has shifted. This was the experience of thousands of people across 6 continents on what came to be known as the day the Earth forgot to spin. But here's what makes this story even more chilling. Within hours of the anomaly being reported, every major government on the planet began issuing the same statement. Nothing unusual has occurred. Please continue with your normal activities. The synchronization of these denials was so perfect, so coordinated, that it raised more questions than it answered. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most suppressed stories of the 20th century, a 24-hour period that challenged everything we thought we knew about physics, time, and the very nature of our planet's rotation. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this event has been buried in classified files for over 6 decades, and why some researchers believe it wasn't a natural phenomenon at all. The morning of December 9th, 1958, began like any other day for Dr. Helena Morrison, a chronometer specialist at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, England. Her job was to maintain the precision timepieces that helped coordinate global navigation and communication. At exactly 6:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, Dr. Morrison noticed something that would haunt her for the rest of her career. The master chronometer, a device so accurate it could measure time to the thousandth of a second, was disagreeing with the position of the sun by nearly 3 hours. Not 3 minutes, not 3 seconds, but 3 full hours. Her first instinct was mechanical failure, but as she checked instrument after instrument, the same impossible reading appeared everywhere. Within the hour, similar reports began flooding in from observatories around the world. The Palomar Observatory in California reported that star positions were completely wrong for the time of day. The Tokyo Astronomical Observatory documented that the sun's path across the sky had somehow shifted by 45 degrees. Radio operators in Australia noted that their longitude-based time calculations were producing results that defied physics. But here's where the story becomes truly mysterious. While scientific instruments around the world were registering this temporal anomaly, digital clocks, mechanical timepieces, and even atomic clocks continued ticking normally. It was as if 2 separate versions of time were running simultaneously, the time measured by human-made devices and the time indicated by the actual position of our planet in space. Dr. Morrison's detailed logs from that day, which weren't declassified until 2019, reveal the growing panic among the scientific community. Her notes describe urgent phone calls between observatories, hastily organized conferences, and increasingly frantic attempts to understand what was happening. Most disturbing of all, her records show that by 2 p.m. London time, she was instructed by unnamed government officials to stop documenting the anomaly entirely. The implications of what was being observed were staggering. If the Earth had somehow altered its rotational speed or position, the effects should have been catastrophic. Tidal waves would have devastated coastlines, the atmosphere would have shifted violently, satellites and spacecraft would have been thrown off course. Yet none of these secondary effects occurred. This led some researchers to propose an even more unsettling theory. What if the Earth hadn't changed at all? What if something else in the universe had shifted, something so fundamental that it altered our planet's relationship to time and space itself? Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in the Nevada desert, a different kind of mystery was unfolding. The Atomic Energy Commission was conducting what they called routine atmospheric testing that same day. Project Desert Storm, as it was internally coded, involved the detonation of multiple high-yield nuclear devices in rapid succession. The official purpose was to study the effects of atomic weapons on desert terrain. But declassified documents from the 1990s reveal a more complex picture. The nuclear tests weren't just about weapons research. They were part of a classified program investigating something called temporal displacement effects. The documents, heavily redacted even decades later, reference attempts to synchronize artificial energy pulses with natural planetary frequencies. Could it be mere coincidence that the world's first documented global time anomaly occurred on the same day that multiple governments were experimenting with technologies designed to interfere with what they called planetary temporal mechanics? The official answer has always been yes, it was coincidence. But the evidence suggests something far more deliberate. Dr. James Whitfield, a physicist who worked on Project Desert Storm before becoming a whistleblower in the 1980s, provided a chilling account of that day. According to Whitfield, the nuclear detonations weren't random. They were precisely timed to occur at moments when the Earth's magnetic field would be at specific points in its natural oscillation cycle. Whitfield claimed that the project was based on theoretical work suggesting that if you could generate enough electromagnetic disruption at exactly the right moments, you could temporarily decouple a planet from its normal temporal flow. The goal, according to his testimony, was to create a brief window where time moved differently in different parts of the world, potentially allowing for unprecedented military advantages. Whether or not you believe Whitfield's account, the timing remains suspicious. Multiple independent nuclear tests, conducted by different countries, all occurred within a 6-hour window on December 9, 1958. The Soviet Union detonated 2 devices in Siberia. France conducted an underground test in the Sahara. Even smaller nuclear powers were mysteriously active that day. But let's step back from conspiracy theories for a moment and examine what everyday people experienced during those strange 24 hours. This is where the story becomes truly fascinating, because while governments and scientists were scrambling to understand the data, ordinary citizens around the world were reporting experiences that seemed to come from another reality entirely. In London, hundreds of people called police stations to report that the sun was stuck in the sky. Office workers noticed that their lunch breaks seemed to last for hours, while the afternoon felt like it compressed into minutes. Children playing in schoolyards became confused when recess bells rang, but the sun hadn't moved from its morning position. In New York City, radio station WNBC received over 3,000 calls from listeners claiming that the day felt wrong. Traffic controllers at LaGuardia Airport documented that several pilots reported their flight times didn't match the movement of the sun across the sky. One commercial pilot logged that a flight from Boston to New York, scheduled for 90 minutes, felt like it lasted 6 hours, though his instruments showed the normal flight time. Perhaps most intriguingly, hospitals around the world reported unusual patterns in patient behavior that day. Emergency rooms saw a 400% increase in visits from people complaining of severe disorientation and nausea. Psychiatric wards noted that patients with previously stable conditions became agitated and confused, often repeatedly asking, "What time is it?" and becoming distressed when given answers. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a neurologist working in San Francisco General Hospital in 1958, kept personal notes about the day that she shared with researchers decades later. She described treating dozens of patients who insisted that time was moving wrong. These weren't people with mental health issues or substance abuse problems. They were teachers, engineers, nurses, and other professionals who had never experienced anything like this before. What makes Dr. Chen's accounts particularly compelling is that she experienced the temporal distortion herself. Her shift was scheduled from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., a normal 10-hour day. But according to her personal journal, that single shift felt like it lasted nearly 20 hours, while simultaneously feeling compressed and rushed. She wrote that looking at clocks provided no relief because they seemed to be lying about what time really was. Similar reports came from every continent. In Australia, construction workers building the Sydney Opera House noted that their morning coffee breaks seemed to stretch on endlessly, while the afternoon work period flashed by in what felt like minutes. In Japan, factory supervisors documented that production quotas that should have taken 8 hours were completed in what workers experienced as 3 hours, though the time clocks showed normal progression. The psychological impact extended beyond individual experiences. Community events scheduled for December 9th became chaotic as people arrived at vastly different times, all believing they were punctual. Wedding ceremonies were disrupted when guests arrived hours early or hours late, despite following the same schedules they had always used. School districts received thousands of calls from parents confused about pickup times, even though the dismissal schedule hadn't changed. But here's what makes this story even more extraordinary. Despite these widespread experiences affecting millions of people across the globe, there are virtually no contemporary media reports about the day. Newspapers from December 10, 1958, contain no unusual headlines. Radio and television broadcasts from that evening make no mention of temporal anomalies or widespread confusion. This media silence wasn't accidental. Declassified memos from the British Ministry of Information, the U.S. Federal Communications Commission, and similar agencies in other countries show a coordinated effort to suppress any reporting about the day's events. News editors received direct government contact discouraging coverage of unsubstantiated time-related claims. Radio stations were advised that broadcasting temporal confusion stories could cause public panic. The speed and coordination of this information suppression suggests it was planned in advance. Media blackout protocols were activated within hours of the anomaly being reported, far too quickly for a spontaneous response to an unexpected event. This raises the disturbing possibility that some government agencies knew what was going to happen on December 9, 1958. By December 10th, the temporal anomaly had ended as mysteriously as it had begun. Sundials once again matched atomic clocks. Star positions returned to their expected locations. The sun resumed its normal path across the sky. But the questions raised by those 24 hours have never been satisfactorily answered. In the years that followed, several researchers attempted to investigate what became known as the December 9th event. Most faced significant obstacles. Dr. Morrison, the Greenwich Observatory chronometer specialist, found her detailed logs reclassified at a higher security level. When she tried to publish her findings in 1962, she was informed that doing so would violate national security regulations. Dr. Whitfield, the nuclear physicist turned whistleblower, faced even harsher consequences. After going public with his claims about Project Desert Storm in 1983, he was arrested on charges of revealing classified information. Although the charges were eventually dropped, his security clearance was permanently revoked, and he was effectively blacklisted from scientific employment. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the December 9th event isn't what happened that day, but what happened to people who remembered it clearly. Starting in the early 1960s, researchers began documenting a phenomenon they called temporal amnesia among those who had experienced the strongest effects of the anomaly. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, a psychiatrist who studied this phenomenon extensively, found that people who had reported severe disorientation on December 9, 1958, began losing memories of the event within 5 years. By 1965, many individuals who had made detailed reports about the day claimed to have no recollection of anything unusual happening. Hendricks theorized that the human brain, when confronted with experiences that contradict fundamental assumptions about reality, sometimes chooses to forget rather than integrate impossible memories. But critics of her work suggested a more sinister explanation, that the amnesia wasn't natural, but induced through unknown means. Supporting this darker theory were reports from family members who noticed that their relatives' personalities seemed subtly different after the supposed memory loss. Spouses reported that their partners became more compliant and less curious about unexplained phenomena. Children noted that parents who had previously been interested in science and mystery suddenly avoided such topics entirely. Today, more than 6 decades after the December 9th event, very few people retain clear memories of that day. Most of the scientists who documented the anomaly have passed away, and their research remains locked in classified archives. The few declassified documents that exist are so heavily redacted that they raise more questions than they answer. But in recent years, advances in independent research have begun to shed new light on what might have happened in 1958. Atmospheric scientists studying historical weather data have noted unusual electromagnetic readings from December 9, 1958, that don't match any known natural phenomena. Geologists examining ice core samples from that period have found isotope patterns that suggest the Earth's magnetic field experienced a brief but intense disruption. The implications of this research are staggering. If the December 9th event really occurred as described, it represents evidence that human technology in 1958 had reached a level of sophistication that officially didn't exist for decades afterward. It suggests that experiments in temporal manipulation were not only possible, but actually conducted on a global scale. More troubling still, it raises questions about what other historical events might have been artificially induced or suppressed. If governments possessed the ability to temporarily alter the flow of time in 1958, what other capabilities might they have developed in the intervening decades? The story of December 9, 1958, serves as a stark reminder that history is written by those in power and that some truths are considered too dangerous for public knowledge. Whether the December 9th event was a natural anomaly, a failed experiment, or a successful demonstration of impossible technology, its suppression demonstrates the lengths to which authorities will go to maintain their version of reality. As we continue to push the boundaries of physics and explore the fundamental nature of time and space, perhaps we'll eventually understand what really happened on that strange day when the Earth seemed to forget how to spin. Until then, the December 9th event remains one of history's most compelling mysteries, a 24-hour window when the impossible became briefly, terrifyingly real. The next time you check your watch and feel like something's not quite right about the passage of time, remember December 9th, 1958. Remember that sometimes reality is far stranger than we're allowed to know, and that the most important truths are often the ones we're told never happened at all.